Welcome to COM 111, Mass Communications. My name is Ricardo Rebello, and I'll be your professor for this class. Just to give you a little background on me, once again, my name is Ricardo Rebello. I'm a full-time instructor at BCC. My background in communication includes filmmaking. I've been a cinematographer, a director, a writer. I've written for several magazines. I currently write for a website called geekdad.com. I was a radio show host for WHJJ. Currently, I host two different podcasts on the Geek Dad Network, one being Hey You Geeks and the other being Dadawan. So you can see that I have kind of a long relationship with mass communication. So here's just a little quick shot of my Internet Movie Database page. Actually, this is a little older version. I have a few more things since then. But to give you a little background on my history in television and film. So here is my contact information. My office is in H112 in the Margaret Jackson Arts Center. My extension is 2820. You can call the BCC number and then just add that extension number to reach me. My email address is ricardo.rebello@bristolcc.edu, or you can contact me right through the email in this class. My mailbox, if you need to drop anything off to me, is in H129A. Once again, the Margaret Jackson Arts Center, room 129A. The book you'll be needing for this course is Media and Culture by Richard Campbell, Christopher Martin, and Bettina Fabos. The version you see here is not the current version, but be sure to get the current version of Media and Culture for this class. So the basic definition of mass media is that mass media are means of communication that are used to reach the general public for the purposes of creating audiences for information, artistic expression, and other kinds of messages. I mean, we talked a little bit about this in COM 106, about the medium mass, the vehicle of mass media, and we're going to go more in depth into COM 111. So here is the main purpose of this course and the main purpose of taking communication, which is media literacy. As it's defined here, is a repertoire of competencies that enable you to analyze, evaluate, and create messages in a wide variety of media modes, genres, and formats. To explain it simply, media literacy is your understanding of the media and how it works, and how you can better create messages for companies, organizations, or just for yourself to be more understandable and digestible for the public. You have to understand why things work, why things don't work, and how best to communicate with audiences. So just to give us a basic framework of where we are now, we think about how we use media and communication today. You know, people like Kim Kardashian or Perez Hilton or Miley Cyrus, the use of Facebook, the internet, you know, companies like Apple, how we communicate and talk to each other, and the type of people who've learned to manipulate how we communicate and talk to each other should give you pause and make you reflect on how they've been able to use media and use the current system to get people to listen to their messages, even if they really don't have much of a message. So let's talk about the foundation of all this. I mean, you look at this picture here of a cave painting. What does it represent? Well, obviously it represents a hunter killing some elk out in the woods. But what it really represents to us as media people is that going back thousands of years, that people have always wanted to communicate stories to other people. People wanted to record the events in their life and share them with other people. So that desire for communication is a foundational desire that has always been there. So it hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is the technology around it and the adaptiveness of people, the audience, the creators, to use different types of technology to better tell the story that you see right here on this cave painting, right? The desire, like I said, the foundation, the desire, the concept has always been there. Our modalities have just changed how we used it. So to put it simply, when you break down the different eras of communication, we start with oral communication. And when you think about it, oral communication was the chief form of communication up until we had handwriting, which involved people sitting down and writing books. But even then, it wasn't until really the 1400s where written communication could take off. It wasn't until the printing press where people could afford and widely consume written communication. All right. So we went from written to being able to print. Okay. That's where we go. That's where we're heading into as far as the printing press goes, to electronic communication and now to digital communication. So this is basically broken down into 5 parts, how we've arrived to communication today. So like we said, oral communication, the ability to share stories with each other. And the reason why I'm using this picture is it kind of depicts that old-fashioned game that we played as kids called the phone game. One of the fundamental problems with oral communication is that when you're passing a story down from person to person, ear to ear, that things get changed, that the truth at some point sort of gets molded into different things, which didn't make oral communication the perfect modality for communicating to people, but it's how we did it for a few thousand years. Here we see a monk writing up a Bible. I mean, and that's basically what written communication was. Because so few people could read or write, for over 1,000 years, monks and scribes would have to handwrite each book individually. We'll talk more about that in the chapter. But basically, this was a very limited form because you needed someone to write you out a whole book. You also needed the ability to read it. So even though it was the next evolution in our communication, it was extremely limited to very few people. And here is the printing press. The importance of the printing press is that it made books available and less expensive so that the common person could now have an opportunity to buy a book and perhaps even learn to read. So now we see an acceleration in how media grows and how it gets out to more and more people. Electronic communication expands that even further. By using sound recording first, and then movies second, and then television, as we see here with Walter Cronkite, electronic communication facilitated for a lot of people who didn't even need to read the ability to consume vast quantities of information. And last but not least, we see Perez Hilton here, the founder and editor of TMZ, the online, some would say news, some would say not news website. Whether news or not, digital has become the modern form of communication. And what has happened with digital is not only that people can get information quickly, but they can get information that's tailored to themselves. That if they want nothing but gossip or nothing but information that has one political view or another, they now can be very selective in the information they get and they consume and they read or watch. So we see here in this slide the concept of the media as storytellers, which can be problematic. As it says in the slide, at their worst, the media's appetite for telling and selling stories leads them to exploit or misrepresent tragedy. They hurtle from one event to another, and they lose their critical distance. What does this mean? Well, every time now when you turn on a 24 hours news network and you look at the bottom of the screen, it always says breaking news or hot news or current news or whatever. And what it is they're basically using hyperbole for every news story that they have to make it sound as everything is enormously important. The problem with that is it becomes impossible to differentiate what is actually a huge news story, or something that's just extremely trivial. And they tend to misrepresent it because their goal is not to facilitate giving information. Their goal is to create money and get viewers. Now, this is a polar change from television news historically, or news in general historically, where news was always seen as a money loser for a media organization because they felt that it was more important to get the truth out to the public than it was to make a buck. But since we got 24-hour news in 1984 with CNN, and especially once we start in 1996 with Fox News and the expansion of 24-hour cable news, news no longer, the emphasis is no longer in truth. The emphasis is in getting ratings. And on the bottom here, if we can examine the critique the powerful dynamics of the media, we'd be better able to monitor the rapid changes going around us, right? So this paragraph goes back to media literacy, right? Our job is to examine and critique what they are doing. Are they doing the right thing? Do they have their heart in the right place? And how and why does this matter? So in this slide here, we want to discuss or begin to discuss the digital era and how digital communication redefined news and social interaction. Most of you know that, understand that, because you've seen this evolution in your life, how digital communication is facilitated, most importantly, 24-hour hyper fast news and social interaction. And what it's done is it's stopped media organizations from having time to really research and get perspective on the story before it's released. Because the idea of being scooped, to use a news term, by a website or a website publisher has driven a lot of the classic news agencies crazy. And because of that, we've now kind of surrendered accuracy for speed. Jon Stewart in this quote here, the media is like our immune system. If it overreacts to everything, we actually get sicker or get eczema, as Jon Stewart said at the rally to restore sanity. What does he mean by this? Like I said earlier, the fact that the news overreacts to everything, that we no longer have the ability to parse what is important or not important, and everything gets sort of treated the same way. We become immune. We develop antibodies to information and knowledge. And because of that, we've totally destroyed our perspective of understanding what is and is not important. Another big factor in modern media is that of convergence. As it says here, media convergence is the merging of content across different media channels. Okay, best way to describe convergence is look at your cell phone. Your cell phone is not just a phone; it's a television, it's a texting device, it's a video game system. It does many things other than to facilitate you talking on the phone. So think about 20 years ago. Every device that your cell phone has would have to be a completely different device. So a cell phone is a converging of all those devices. A television, a VCR, a phone, a video game system, all in one. Okay? Crushed together, converging. All right? It also refers to the cross-platform, the consolidation of media holdings under one corporation. So convergence is not just the single item. When you look at a company like News Corp, better known to you perhaps as Fox, you have Fox News, you have obviously the channel Fox, but they also own newspapers, television stations, all kinds of media outlets. When you look at Disney, Disney owns Disney, it owns ESPN, it owns ABC Networks, it owns Star Wars, it owns Marvel Comics. That's also convergence and consolidation. Now, the good and the bad of that is that you have very few companies controlling several messages going out, and their ability to use each individual outlet to promote whatever it is they're trying to sell you or whatever information they're trying to dish out. So how does something become a new form of mass media? Right. Broken down into three very simple concepts. The first stage is novelty, or the development stage. An inventor, think of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in their garage in the late 1970s creating the first Apple computer. That's the novelty or development stage. They're trying to figure out what it is they're trying to create and just how to get it to work. The second part is the entrepreneurial stage. Well, after they figured out how to get the Apple to work and what it was, they needed money. They had to multiply these things. Think of Nolan Bushnell in the early 1970s when he created Atari video games. Nolan Bushnell created the first portable video game that you could put inside of a bar or a club or what have you, called Pong. He needed money to make multiples of these. He wanted to make 5,000 of them to get out there. So once you've developed an idea, you've got to find investors to pay you or to give you money to multiply that concept and get it out into the public. The last part is the mass medium stage. Once those concepts get out to the public and people use them, then it takes on a life of its own because it becomes part of the ether of society. It becomes part of everything around us. It becomes ubiquitous. When you think of Apple nowadays, Apple is everything. It's a television, it's a cell phone, it's a computer. The name Apple, the brand Apple represents something. So Apple went from being a concept inside of a garage to being an entire mass media conglomerate. And that's where the mass medium stage comes in. One of the things that it's kind of a sad bit of information, but I always say those who make it, those who steal it, and then those who make money from it. Sadly, throughout history, the people who have made products or engineered products are not exactly the people who have benefited or make money from them. Another classic example of this is Facebook. When you think of the evolution of Facebook from being just an app created for a bunch of people in college at Harvard, and an idea that may or may not have been stolen and then adapted throughout time. So you see here the evolution of Facebook from 2004 just to 2012, and you see obviously just the name alone, the Facebook, eventually being dropped and being just Facebook. We see how it grew in a very rapid period of time from being something used by very few people on a conceptual level to being used by the entire world in a global media level. So we're going to backtrack a little bit and talk about something that we talked about in COM 106, which is the models of mass communication, and more specifically the linear model. You have a sender. The sender creates a message. The message goes through a mass media channel, usually through a set of gatekeepers, well, historically, but not so much anymore. The receivers, and then it goes to the receivers. How does feedback fit into this model? All right. So you take your sender, say it's you create a story. You put that story on a web page or on a blog. All right. If you're like me, I have to, when I write stories for the web page that I work for, have to go through my editors and publishers. They review my story, make sure that my copy and my content is good before they let it out to the general public who will be receiving the message. The feedback nowadays are very simple, is the comment section attached to any story or message that you create. Virtually everything now has the ability to either review or comment. This is something that wasn't done historically. Historically, people had to send in letters. They had to sit down and actually hand write a letter to a newspaper or a magazine or a television station, or write an editorial opinion so that people could get their perspective. All right. And it says at the bottom here, the cultural model recognizes that individuals bring diverse meanings to the message. Okay? The concept is that having people of different cultures and different types facilitates a lot of different stories, and most importantly gives us perspective on how that story can change from person to person. So to explain it even more simply, as you can see here with the Batman concept of mass communication, okay? So what it is, you have the people of Gotham City creating the information, otherwise known as the bat signal. The destination is putting it in the sky, which is a mass communication device. But we also have the concept of noise. Noise is the dysfunction, any interference with the message traveling along the channel. So for instance, if you write a story on a blog, then people may or may not get to it because of all the other stories and all of the other clutter that's on the internet, okay? The receiver is Batman. He gets and decodes that information and decides to show up and take care of the bad guys or what have you. All right. A couple of other things are the transmitter, which is the bat beacon, which encodes the message, and the channel, which is the beam of light to which the bat signal goes through. Here's a pie chart showing you the daily media consumption platform by 2010. So you can imagine how this has changed over the last 6 years. 32% of the information people use on a TV, 25% on a computer, 20% on a mobile device, 5% on video games, 6% on the radio, 6% for print, 4% for the movie theater, and 3% CDs. And this was in 2010. So if you were to extrapolate what this could possibly be now, it would probably be even more lopsided. And I would guess that the computer has overtaken the television as far as information. So as we begin our journey into media, let us think about, once again, media literacy. As stated here, media literacy is a critical, not cynical approach. What does that mean? Well, it means that when we look at things, we try to look at things fairly and not always look at negative aspects, not always trying to sensationalize or use a lot of hyperbole in our approach. We try to be fair, and we try to be, to borrow from Fox News, fair and balanced. Okay? It involves analysis and interpretation of facts. Okay? The truth, not opinion. One of the hardest things for people to learn in mass media and news reporting early on is that there's a very big difference between editorial and informative. Okay? Your opinion is editorial. The facts are to inform. And there should be a gap between those two. Next, it encourages you to take action to help shape a cultural environment, right? Your analysis can help shape the way people perceive something, their logic and understanding of what a product, person, or thing is. So it's very important and very powerful. When you think of certain news agencies who have kind of a bias, their bias affects the way people consume that information. And that, in fact, affects society and culture. To break that down even further, when we think about media literacy and the critical process, we start with describing what something is. What is it? What is Facebook, per se? And now giving it analysis. What does it mean? What is its cultural value? All right? We try to interpret what the message is trying to be sent. Okay? What are they really trying to get people to do? What are they really trying to inform us? We evaluate whether or not that is good. Is it working? You might think that a certain company does a terrible job at something, but the fact that they're successful with it means that you have to try to understand why. You might look at a certain, like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, and say, well, that show's garbage. Well, you can't just say that, because apparently it is reaching thousands and not millions of people. So instead of just saying that it's terrible or you don't like it, it's more important as someone learning media literacy to say, what is it about this that makes it work for so many people? Why do they get engaged with it? And last is engagement, which is making your opinion, stating your opinion, publishing your opinion, and backing your opinion. Getting involved, right? Having a say in all of this. So why should we care about all this? Why is this important? What are the benefits of having this critical perspective? Well, number one, it lets you evaluate the standards by which we judge our culture. Learning what is popular, what works, what isn't popular, what doesn't work, helps to give you a barometer on the way our culture is thinking and feeling, what people are looking for. Next, recognize the links between cultural expression and daily life, right? When you look at something, say, like Pokemon Go, Pokemon Go is something that's not just affecting communication and the way people share information, it's also making people commune and work together, and it is affecting their daily lives. It's affecting their behavior, what they do. Next, monitor how well the media serve democratic practices, all right? It's fascinating also to see, like I said earlier, how news organizations affect the way people vote, affect the way people gather and the way they protest, and all the other things that are part of that democratic process. Lastly, for next week, I'll have you watch and write a little essay on Mickey's Monopoly. I want you to look at an episode of South Park dealing with the Jonas Brothers and Disney and talk about and reflect and have write a couple of little things about how does this impact and what does it say about media and culture in our current society. Thank you.